I am extremely happy to be here today to hear Renee Griffith talk about the art of teaching boys, because it's such an incredibly important topic. And, we've heard a lot today about how boys learn, but hearing about teaching boys is an entirely different aspect of the conversation. And so the director of Cornerstone Christian Academy, for the last 30 years, Renee has consistently developed academic opportunities centered on inclusivity for children who have suffered from parental neglect and/or cognitive and developmental differences. Her innovative approaches include the development of specialized curricula, facilities, and staff to support these unique situations, including piloting her school's award-winning and nationally recognized STAR program, Strategies, Tutoring, Assistance, and Remediation. It's a program for children in kindergarten through graduation. It is my great privilege to turn it over to Renee Griffith.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Congratulations, you have made it to the end of today's workshops and seminars, and the content has been wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Green and the Boys Initiative, for putting this together. And I hope that at the end of today, you will walk away with a sense of just encouragement for teaching boys in whatever capacity that you interact with young men. A little about myself: I have had 45 foster children. Of those, 42 have been little boys. So lots of boys in my life, as well as 3 boy sons of my own. So I have a little bit of experience raising boys. And boys are so different from girls. Wow. Boys are active, boys are excited, boys are busy, and sometimes a classroom just does not meet their needs because little girls tend to be more studious. And I've worked in the classroom for over 26 years and have seen boys just melt underneath some teachers. And it breaks my heart where I've seen other boys flourish under teachers. So I began to try to find the common denominator of what was happening in the classroom so that boys were able to flourish. And as Dr. Green will tell you in many of her seminars and lectures, what you do, the strategies that you put in place for boys do not hurt girls. So it's very important to remember that these strategies that you put in place, they will not hurt the young ladies in the classroom or in any way that you're interacting with them. And so the first strategy that I have seen that teachers use that are effective with boys, that have boys excel in the classroom or even in any way that they're interacting, is number one, the art of teaching. You have to see the unseen. The very first important point is to see the unseen. What is the unseen?
Ms. Griffith, I'm just going to tag in here for one quick second. Are we supposed to be seeing a screen share from you right now?
Not see anything?
No, ma'am.
Just my face?
Yeah, just your face. It's lovely, by the way.
Anything? I'm just looking down at my notes.
Not a problem.
Okay.
We're good to go. Please continue. My apologies.
No problem. So the first thing that we want to do to have the art of teaching, which really is the heart of teaching, is to see the unseen. So what is the unseen? Well, first, it could be potential, to see the unseen potential in the young man that's in your classroom. He's not just the wiggly little guy that won't sit still. There is potential there. And to actually see the person of the child. We can get so busy in the presentation of the information and the preparation of the class that we forget to see the child that is sitting there in the classroom. But really the key that I want you to see with seeing the unseen is boys have a small window of opportunity that they are receptive to learning. And it's very important that we watch for that window when it's open and the young man is receptive to learning. And that requires you to see something that you can't actually see. And I kind of equate it to, have you ever been driving down the road? You've taken the same route every day to get to work. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of your eye, you see a barn. And you look over and you say, when did that barn? I've never seen that barn, but that barn has always been there. It's been there every time you've driven by, but all of a sudden you became aware of the barn on the side of the road. You have to become aware of the child's potential, the person that's sitting in your room, and then that window of opportunity. You can see it in the young man when you're talking and they're looking away, but there's a window when they look at you, and it's just a small window, and you need to take and seize that opportunity of presenting the material then. Now, for little boys, that window might only be open a crack, but if you recognize that window, you can help them learn the material, and that window will open up just a little bit more. The second thing that is required in the art of teaching boys is teachers must remove obstacles. Now, I've watched teachers unknowingly place additional obstacles and hurdles for children to overcome. And for little boys, the classroom can be overwhelming, and it already is a challenge. And if there are obstacles in the way to them learning, the challenge can be insurmountable, and they'll shut that window, and that window of opportunity for that little boy will be gone in that day, or sometimes it's gone completely. And so the teacher has to remove the obstacles. This requires the teacher being engaged and actively aware. Removing obstacles does not happen by chance, and it doesn't happen on its own. The teacher must remove the obstacle. And the teacher can remove obstacles by what you say, and a teacher can remove obstacles by what you do. A perfect example that I try to help our teachers is when they began to give instruction to a little boy or a young man on how to do something. I encourage them to say, you can do this, you can do this. I try to immediately remove the obstacle of what they're thinking. Many times boys are overwhelmed in the classroom, and they're sitting there thinking, I can't do this. And that's the only thing they hear in their head is, I can't do this. I don't understand. And so if your voice can be a voice that says to them, you can do this, you can begin to remove the first obstacle that you can't see, which is what is the soundtrack playing in their head. So I say to the young men, you can do this. I often say to them, you can do this in 5 minutes. You're going to learn this in 5 minutes, because, sometimes when the teacher's talking, all the child hears is wah, 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 wah. And so if I let them know, listen, 5 minutes, they know there's a start and an end, and they're not going to hear me. And so then the obstacle gets removed of that window being closed. They start to open that window a little bit. Okay, she said 5 minutes. I can do this. So teachers have to remove obstacles. And remember, the strategies that we're talking about to help little boys will not hurt little girls. They'll help little girls as well. So teachers need to remove obstacles. They need to say, you can do this, and you can get this in 5 minutes. Now, it may take a little longer than 5 minutes, but at least they know there is an end in sight, and they're not just going to be subject to just endless instructions. Removing obstacles means breaking down steps for boys. Remove whatever obstacle is there. My third point in the art of teaching is teachers must facilitate successes for children. To me, this is probably the key point, is facilitating success. Success does not happen by accident. And you may have a young man in your classroom or that has come into your life that has never experienced a success. And all they've experienced is failure at things that they are trying to do. And if a teacher will actively facilitate a win for a little boy, that win can often turn the tide for them, where they get a little taste of success and they want it, and they'll open that window, and success facilitates more success, just as failure oftentimes facilitates more failure. So facilitating success, it does not happen by accident. The teacher must be intentional and must create opportunities. You have to make that child successful. Now, how do you do that? You're thinking, oh man, how can every child be successful? I want to share with you a story that just happened. After 26 years of teaching, I was able to step out of the classroom and work in my job as a principal. But this year, due to unforeseen circumstances, I ended up back in the classroom. And it reignited this passion that I have for teaching children. I ended up with middle school, and I have a young man named Christopher who arrived at our school his first year at our school. I got his student records and found out that Christopher did not have a successful year last year. In fact, it was very bad. Christopher is number 2 of 16 children, number 2. So, you know, the first baby is fun. The second baby comes along. They have that, if there's a third one, they have the middle child syndrome. Can you imagine being number 2 of 16? So not a lot of time spent with Christopher. And so last year at school, he became a bully. He was mean. I found out he ran away from the school and almost got hit on the road by traffic coming by. I mean, he just had a terrible year. And I was just expecting this little boy with horns and a tail. And I met Christopher, and he's little and he has all this potential. And I began to see in Christopher, I was like, oh my goodness, we've got to turn this around for this young man. This may be the only year we get. And so for Christopher, he gave me those looks like, I've got your number. And I just look at him back, and I began to say to Christopher, one thing I learned about him was English was not his first language. His first language is Spanish. And so understanding instructions has been very difficult for him. And so he's very frustrated with academics, very frustrated in the classroom. And I looked and realized Christopher has not made honor roll in a long time. So it became my goal that this first quarter, Christopher was going to make honor roll. So we reached the first test, and he takes it and he bombs it. I mean, it's terrible. So I pulled Christopher aside and I said, Christopher, listen, buddy, I want you to go back over these questions. I want to help you with these questions. So we go back over those questions, and he gets them, and so his grade comes up. And so we're just clicking along. We reached the second test. He does a little better, but still is struggling. So I found a student in the classroom that is very good at making notes. And I said, Christopher, come here. Has anybody ever taught you how to make notes? And he said, no. I said, well, this young lady is great at making notes, and she's going to help you. And they started taking notes together. And so then I said to Christopher, any notes you give me, I'm going to give you extra credit on your test. And so he started making notes. So I gave him an opportunity. Well, his grades have come up. We've reached the end of the 9 weeks, and he's 1 test grade away from honor roll. And he needs at least an 80%. I give him his test. He takes his test. He makes a 74. 74. So I pull Christopher aside as a social studies test. I said, Christopher, first I said to the class, I said, class, Christopher has worked so hard. He's missed 1 question too many. Christopher needs 1 question right to make honor roll. I said, don't we want Christopher to make honor roll? And the classroom said, yes. And I said, Christopher, you get 1 phone a friend. Who do you want to ask to help? And he picked the young lady that helped him make notes. I said, you got to fix 1 question. So together, they collectively worked together to fix the question. And the whole classroom was watching. And you could feel them hoping that Christopher with his phone a friend would get it right. They got it right. I took the test. I said, Christopher, you just made honor roll. And the entire class erupted. They were so excited. And for that moment, we facilitated success for Christopher. Now he probably is never going to remember that Magellan was the one who named the Pacific Ocean, but he got that question right. Woo! And he made honor roll. And so for Christopher, I feel like in this moment, we are changing the trajectory of his life because I saw an opportunity to make him successful. And I could have just well, Christopher, you didn't make it. Maybe next quarter you'll make it. But by golly, he was one question away. The teachers, parents, coaches, we have to find ways to create a win for the boys. They got to win. We need to make the environment successful. So in that moment, I changed the environment in the classroom where we became a team. We were rooting for each other. And people were on Christopher's side. Can I tell you, I've not had one problem with Christopher at the school. I've not had one behavior. In fact, his parents, I pulled him aside and I said, he's a model student in my classroom. And they said, really? And I said, yes, he is. And they said, we were going to take him to therapy because he was so bad at his last school. And I said, we're not talking about the same boy. Now, I knew we were, but Christopher could hear me. And I said, we're not talking about the same boy. And it's just been really neat. It's reignited the passion. And actually working with Christopher, I began to talk to my husband and work through what were we doing that was making him successful, which is how I came up with these 5 points, because I realized that I was doing these things, just they were coming to me. And I thought, man, these could help a lot of people that are working with boys. And then you have to celebrate those successes. When you create them, you have to celebrate them. Christopher needed to know that we were on his side. And it conveyed to the entire classroom that there's a heart there for children to learn. So, well, Dr. Green, Dr. Green just piped in and said, this should be your next book. I am going to try to work on that. So thank you for your support in that. All right, we'll move on to the next point. I'm trying to be mindful of time in case there's any questions as we move along.
Well, Renee, can I ask a quick question here? One that I was just itching at for earlier. So if getting our sons teachers and boys teachers to, really try to set up these systems to facilitate their success, how can we engage our teachers to get them on board when there's so much COVID burnout and political burnout with all the things that teachers are stressed out, budget cuts? How can we really get them on board with enthusiasm about something that for a lot of districts is going to be a really different way of approaching it?
It is. First of all, if there are any administrators there listening today, I think you need to evaluate your teachers and find out if they're there for the job or if they're there for the calling. Because if they are there because it's a job, I'm not sure that you can get them on board because this requires work. But you will find teachers that are not there because it's a job. And those teachers can begin to implement change. And as those teachers begin to have success, the other teachers will come along. So I think you have to find inside of wherever the organization is that you are, you have to find those key people that are there because they believe that inside of them, their purpose for living is teaching. And those people can facilitate this change. They will be open to this because they want children to be successful. They see what is happening to boys. They see that the learning challenges are typically, the learning diagnoses are majority boys. The dismissals, the suspensions are majority boys. And they're seeing violence increase among boys because the boys are frustrated and they're not heard, they're not seen, and they're not successful. If I was not successful at my job, if I was not heard and not seen, I would be frustrated and I would not want to go back. And that's what we're seeing in little boys and big boys that become men. And so I think the key is going to be finding those teachers who believe intrinsically that, yes, this is my job, but it is also my calling and not, I'm just here for the 20 years and I can check out. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Hageman. I don't know how she did it, but every person in that room believed Mrs. Hageman was she was on their side and she was called to teach. And then I remember my 5th grade teacher, Miss Willard, who could care less we were in that classroom. And they've both gone on to, they're no longer here with us. But the impact both of those women had on me is tremendous. One for positive and one not so much. So I think facilitating change is going to be finding those key people that believe and that want to make a difference. And so because it requires work. This facilitating success requires work, and you have to be intentional about it, and you have to do it and do it and do it and do it until the child is successful. And you've got to continually remove the obstacles to the material. You know, sometimes I'll have a worksheet and I can see it in the little boy's eyes, like they're drowning. There are 25 math problems on that page. And I'll say to that little boy, show me you can do these two, and I'll mark these two off. I just removed an obstacle. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, show me you can do these two. And if they miss these two, then I'll say, okay, let's work on these two. Get these two right. I'll take off two more. And so it's constantly looking for those windows of opportunity where you can just see the crack and you can bring that window open a little bit more. So facilitating success. Thank you for that question, whoever asked that. I appreciate it very much. All right, then my fourth point in helping boys learn, the art of teaching. Now we know that all the different ways the boys learn, that's taught in school. But there's the difference between the science of teaching and the art of teaching. Lots of us know the science, but a successful teacher knows the art of teaching. And my fourth point is to make a connection. And I'm not talking about relationships. That's the last one. When you're presenting material to little boys, you have to find a point that they know and attach the material there and then start forward. Many times we don't find out what they know. And so we just present material and they can't grab onto it. Now I'm from the South, in case you can't tell from my accent, the southern part of the United States. And I went out to the Midwest. And in the Midwest, all the roads are straight. And so you ask somebody out there for directions, and this is what they'll say. Well, you go on I-5 east till you come to I-9 and you go west. Well, I'm from the South. I'm clueless. My son happened to be with us, and I sent him over to a little store to buy some cups. We needed some cups. We were out there visiting. And so the store owner said, son, those cups are on the west wall. And my son went this way. He said, son, the west wall. And my son went that way. He said, the west wall. Well, there were only two walls right. Thank the Lord he got it right. So he comes up to the counter and he said, I'm from the South. We don't give directions like that. And the store owner said, I thought northeast, south, and west was pretty universal. But let me tell you what I'm talking about. In the South, when you ask for directions, somebody will say to you, do you know where Walmart is? You'll say, yes. And they'll say, go there. And then you go past Walmart till you get to the Shell station and you turn left. Now that's how we do instructions in the South. We know there's no I-77 South. You go to Walmart. All right. Well, you have to do that with a little boy. You have to say, do you know this? And they'll say, no. Okay, let's back up. Do you know this? You have to find a place where they can reach onto the material and then start forward. Now, scientists do this all the time. If you look at the periodical table of elements, on the right side are all the noble gases. That might be the left side, depending on your orientation, but you have all the noble gases. When you get way down here at the bottom of the page, you're at element 108. If I had to name all of those elements to get to 108, I start at 1, 2, 3, and go. What scientists do is they back up to the closest noble gas. They put that symbol for the noble gas that's closest, and then they move forward. So they only have to list 3 or 4 elements to get way down on the periodical table of elements because they went to the closest noble gas. Well, we have to do that with material with the little boys. We have to go to the closest piece that they know. So I was in the classroom and I was introducing the concept of positive and negative numbers. So I said to the class, and I say this for the little boys' sakes, I say, who in here can read a thermometer? And I wait to see whose hands go up. And then some of the boys can read a thermometer and some can't. So then I say to them, how many of you have ever spent money? Oh, there we go. Now we got a connection point. And I will say to them, have you ever been to the store and had to borrow money from your mama to buy something? And of course they have. And so I begin to say, if you borrow $5 from your mama and you earn $7, once you pay your mama back, how much do you have? and of course $2. Look what they just did. They just went -5 + 7. But I found a connecting point that they can reach back in their little mind and make a connection. And I can tell a little boy, you're going to get this in 5 minutes. I know you can do this. And we talk through that. And sure enough, in just a few minutes, because they opened that window to me and I made a connection point and I removed an obstacle, they got it. They got it. So that's point number 4. And my last point, and if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll get to those. I don't want to be the only one doing all the talking. All right. Point number 5, and my last point is you must build relationships with the young men. Girls, they're easy to build relationships with. We come out of the womb looking for relationships. But little boys desire relationships too. Little boys want to know that their teacher is on their side. And so you have to actively look for ways to build a relationship with a little boy. And for us female teachers that maybe aren't so athletic, I just want to tell you, you need to throw a ball with the little boy. You speak volumes to that little boy in building a relationship, and look him in the eyes when you're talking to him. Don't look over him. Look him in the eyes. Look at that person that's there. You need to build relationships. And again, all of these things are intentional and they don't happen by accident, and it requires work. But no matter how you work with a little boy in whatever capacity, whether it's in the classroom or in an after-school program or in your home, these 5 strategies will help you begin to unlock concepts and whatever the little boy needs, you can begin to unlock it, because it's the art of teaching. And it doesn't matter what you're teaching the little boy, whether it's math or how to be kind or how to balance a checkbook. These strategies, these 5 areas will help unlock that for the child, and you begin to have the art of teaching. And so the first one, just to recap, number 1 is to see the unseen. You have to see the potential and the person of that little guy and the window of opportunity. Remember, there's only a small window when that little boy will open that window and let you tell him something, and it goes in. And you've got to see the unseen. The second one is you have to remove obstacles. You do that by what you say and by what you do. You remove obstacles that are there for little boys. The third is you must facilitate wins, facilitate success. You must create opportunities for him. And we do this by making those opportunities. Maybe the little boy, maybe his grades came up and you can tell there was an effort. You need to celebrate that win. You need to tell him he won. You need to give him a way to win. Make opportunities of things he can do to win, like extra credits or, just think outside of the box to help those little boys. Number 4, make a connection. Go back to something they know academically and connect that concept to that, so they can have a connection point and move forward. Little girls connect dots easily. Boys jump around like this. So you have to help them see how this piece of information makes sense back here. And then finally, number 5, build relationships. Be intentional about building relationships. See the student and build a relationship with him. I promise you, Christopher is going to remember this school year. And I believe that Christopher will have success in school from here on out, because I saw the potential in him. I looked for those windows of opportunity. I started removing hurdles. I created opportunities for him to be successful. I helped him connect dots with materials, and I began to build a relationship with him. Listen, anytime I need something done, I want to tell you, Christopher will do anything I ask him to do. Christopher, take out the trash, and he's my man. I can say, Christopher, pass these papers out. And he has a sense of pride now in school instead of dread. And he dreaded coming to me. So those are my 5 points. Do we have any questions?
The first question we have is, if you could please go over again the 5 points, but slow enough that I can type them into the chat.
I do tend to talk a little fast. I'll slow it down. I get excited though. It makes me excited when I see a little boy have a win. I mean, that just, when anybody has a win, but especially a young man. All right, so the first one is see the unseen.
Oh, wait, a bunch of other people managed to write it faster than I did. They've got it. Look at that. It's like crowdsourcing. Great.
Oh, thank you all so much. But thank you, Caroline. I appreciate that. You got me. We're a team in here. We're doing this together. Listen, if boys are successful and they become men who are successful, then we have women and children who are successful. I'm not discounting the role of women in success, but when a man is unsuccessful, it impacts women and children in a way that is hard to quantify. When you have a man that's never been successful in school, he probably is not going to experience as much success on a job. And so the cycle of poverty continues. Unfortunately, those things lead to other vices, substances, and lack of opportunities for their boys. And then a cycle starts. So, man, if we can get little boys to have wins and believe that they can do something, and if we can get teachers, and a lot of teachers are women, to see that unseen in that little boy and create the success, we can begin to change the trajectory of many, many lives. And the wake will not be of destruction. The wake will be of success. And that's what we want to see. I don't know how much time we have left, but do we have any other questions?
We have time.
Good. Comments, I hear your feedback.
Yeah, if you've got questions, type them into the chat. We'll be happy to get them up there. One question that I have is, there are some of us that come from districts where there's very much a punitive attitude towards, what is seen as, male misbehavior or miscreants, and I actually heard one educator refer to boys and low socioeconomic boys in particular were an epidemic that needed to be wiped out in school disciplinary action. I mean, it was really, my jaw dropped. So if you're in an environment where there really is that, the hammer of justice is the only approach, how as moms of boys or, sisters of boys or, aunts, how can other folks, how can we first of all advocate for them in a learning environment to try to make this happen, where if it's not happening in the classroom, how can we bring it at home and try to, supplement that? And two, if they have such a horrible experience in school, or if it's so much harder for boys, will we ever bridge the gap of having more male teachers?
Wow. Those questions, if I can answer them, I'll have all kinds of speaking engagement.
I have a knack for that, so don't worry.
That's great. Well, if you are in a district that is punitive, and that does have a negative outlook of boys, and especially boys that come from certain backgrounds, I would just encourage you to be the light in that situation and to start leading the way. It often only takes one person to begin to make a change. Now, you may be the only one, and you may never change your school district, but you can change some of the boys that you have influence over. And so I would encourage you to be the one. And then when you do see those other teachers that are there for the right reasons, start having these conversations about what you're doing and successes that you're seeing and strategies, because really teachers are looking for help. They're looking for strategies. Good teachers are saying, I don't want it to be like this. What can I do? And so if you can begin to be the light and have some answers, I think you can start to lead the change. But if you have any boys in your life, you can create opportunities for them to be successful, and look for coaches who will do that. Look for anybody who will impart into that young man's life, because it only really does take one person to turn it around. I truly believe for Christopher, I've turned it around for everybody. And I'm not bragging on myself, but I don't think Christopher's ever going to have these problems again with other people he interacts with, because number one, he now has some success. He knows he can do it. He's starting to believe in himself. And I think his interactions with adults are going to change. And so as you can find that one child that you can change, that you can help him be successful, you actually might make a difference in the other classrooms he goes into unknowingly. So I know there are some harsh districts out there, and there are some jaded people that probably shouldn't be in education, and they've got in, but we can start to change that opinion. It goes back to seeing the unseen, like seeing that person. Look at that person and stop looking at the behavior and look at the person. Let's see that child again. Let's see that child for who they are and see the potential. There's potential in every human. Like there's potential there. And the misbehavior, if they're really strong in leading that, we can get that turned around. They can be really strong and leading good behavior. So looking for that potential.
Excellent. Shirley has put a question in here. I'm thinking of so many of the men I know who were overseen and consequently missed opportunities to feel special and turn things around, and they now have difficult lives. Is there anything we can do for the boys who are now adults?
Oh, what a great question. I know we only have a few minutes, but I'll just share with you that my father was one of these little boys that was horrible. And he had disabilities, and he was born in 1950, and nobody knew about learning disabilities. And so his behavior got worse and worse and worse and worse. And he'll just tell you, he was terrible. Graduated high school, could not read or write. Father was illiterate. He met my mother, and my mother saw in him something that nobody else saw. And she began to help him learn to read. And my father is now a pastor, graduated from Bible college, but graduated school illiterate. Women can make a difference to men by seeing the unseen. You know, in that adult male, there's still potential. There's still windows of opportunity. And we have to be women that can learn to keep our mouth shut at the right time and open at the right time, and begin to say to that person, you can do this, and remove those obstacles by what we say and do. And we can do this for grown men too, because I know I'm the product of a woman who saw the potential in a young man that didn't have any by the world standards, you know, academic standards. And he raised 3 successful children. My brother is a PhD. My sister is executive director of a nonprofit, and I opened and have a private school that's helping children with learning challenges. We're reversing what happened to him for all kinds of children, but especially for little boys. And that was because a woman saw a potential in a man. So women make impacts in grown men too. Just look for that, see that person again, and not what they're doing and not the choices, but see the person and see the potential. So I hope that helps all of us get some courage and hope that we can make a difference in boys and in men too.
That's outstanding. And there's currently no more questions in the chat, but we do have several minutes left before before we return back to the main session for our closing. So are there any other high points that, you know, if somebody has to have a 30-second, you know, pitch on an elevator, or a 1.5-minute pitch to their superintendent, or, you know, in my community, we're so small, we actually have like open town hall meetings where pretty much the whole school district comes and speaks, you know, or comes and sits and listens, and people can go up to the podium. What's a good elevator pitch for us to bring this kind of methodology into our schools and into our communities?
Wow, that's a great question. You are full of great questions. They picked the right person to moderate this session.
Just a lot of coffee.
I think too much we focus on what's going wrong in our school districts and in our classrooms, and that's what you'll hear. You'll hear the bad test scores. You'll hear all of these things. I think the conversation we need to have is success breeds success. Let's start talking about what we can do right. Let's start talking about the wins and start changing the trajectory. And then you can bring in some of these other points. But I think the conversation, we got to change the conversation. Yes, we know test scores are down because of COVID. And yes, we know that, you know, we've lost all of this stuff.
Says, put your socks on and your shoes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm
Shirley,
sorry.
can I ask you to mute, please, ma'am? Thank you.
I bet that was a little boy she was giving instructions to. Was it? Yes. Put your socks in. She was like, yes.
And I have to say Simon Says. He doesn't like when it's just me saying it. So I have to say Simon Says. Sorry about that.
You found you are facilitating success. You found a way to make him successful in following instructions. That's brilliant. That is brilliant. That's a strategy you can use in the classroom. But I think the conversation, it needs to be, okay, yes, we know it's bad and things aren't going well. Can we start focusing on successes? Because you will find teachers who are having success and people who are having success. And let's start changing the conversation. Because as you hear about things that make success, it causes your mind to start thinking about, I could do that. I could do that. Or wait a minute, maybe this would work. When you hear about all the things that are going wrong, what you start thinking is, yeah, I got that in my classroom too. And But we've got to change, again, we've got to change the conversation to where we start focusing on what can be, not what actually is, but what can be. Boys can be successful. Boys can win. Boys can learn. Boys can lead. Boys can be these things once again, and we can have that in our classrooms.
I'm just going to record that and play it at our next town hall. School district.
Well, speak at any opportunities that anybody has. I'm really passionate about this. Having those 45 foster children and 43 of them being little boys, I can't tell you the wreckage that I've seen in little boys that adults do. Sometimes on purpose, but sometimes unknowingly. Sometimes we fall into these patterns and we forget about the person that's there. And so, golly, anytime we can get this message out, I want to help us go from knowing the science of teaching to the art and having the heart to teach. And really, the heart is the human effort plus the art. The art of teaching with the human effort gives you the heart of teaching. And so I think that's what I'm going to call my book. But we'll see if it ever gets written. But thank you all for your engagement and your time. And Shirley, thank you for giving us another way to make boys successful. I'm going to use that. I am. I'm going to say, okay, everybody, Simon Says, get out your textbooks. They'll do it. That's brilliant.
It works. He gave me that instruction. So I was like, okay, we're going to try that then. Because we've been having listening issues. So yeah.
I'm going to try that with my 6-year-old when I go home.
Let's see. Yeah.
I love it. So thank you everyone for tuning in and for coming to the Boys Summit. Listen, you guys know there's a crisis. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for being willing to figure out what we can do. And it's going to take all of us working together, but we can do this. So, on behalf of myself and all the other presenters, and I know the Boys Initiative, thank you all for tuning in today and being part of this message of making a change and making boys successful again.
Thank you all so very much. Again, I want to thank Renee Griffith for an outstanding session. And I want to thank all of you for coming and participating. It has really just been a wonderful experience. And, I really don't have anything else to say after what she said. She's right. We're thrilled to have you here. The breakout rooms are going to close in roughly 1 minute, just a little bit less than a minute. And then we will be going back to the main room where Dr. Vermel Green will be giving her closing statements. And you will all be dispersed to go about your day. But don't forget to be on the lookout for the email you registered for the conference. You'll be getting sometime early next week the recordings and any materials that you might have missed. Thanks so much, folks. We really appreciate it. And you'll be right back into the main room in about 30 seconds.